the AP English Language and Composition curriculum. This unit, we're going to be going through definitions and perspectives in writing and reading. So this is a very interesting unit. Like normal, the AP English Language AP exam and the units that they break down into are not the easiest to really learn, because you can't, it's not like with a history class or a physics class or something where you can go unit by unit it's each a new topic. With AP Lang, it's just building on basic literary skills and going more and more in depth with it. So making these unit videos is like going through key points that each of the units on College Board like to go through. So this time we're going through definitions and perspectives. This is definitely a little bit more of a branch out between our first 4 units, which are really about theses, evidence, understanding rhetoric, and things like that. On the channel at this point, we've been through the first 4 units, the first 2 essays on the exam. We haven't done the synthesis essay yet, but we're going to do that soon. We've been through examples of these essays, so hopefully you guys are definitely at a good point in preparing for this exam. I'm now on December break, so at this point, my hope is to make some videos going over the synthesis essay and things like that. So when we get back in January, you're in a good place to start prepping, at least start getting your mind the idea of this AP exam. But let's go into this unit. So the first half of this unit is going to be connotative and denotative meanings, or connotative and denotative. I'm going to pronounce it differently. It's fine. There are 2 different types of meanings, and these 2 ideas are ways that can define a word. So a very important thing with this unit, and you'll see that in the questions we're going to do at the end of this video, is about understanding how different words can be understood. And on this section of the AP exam, you're going to see a lot of questions are asking, why is this word used? What's this word choice? Things like that. And a lot of it can be broken down into connotative and denotative meanings as well as perspective. So connotative versus denotative meanings are 2 very important terms to understand. However, you're never going to be really asked on the AP exam what's a connotative or what's the denotative meaning of this word. What it's really going to be is using these ideas to apply them to your writing and reading and understanding. There might be a question. I would doubt it, though. What a denotative meaning is, it has a dictionary definition. That they have dictionary definitions. I don't know why there's a dash there. That's a mistake. But again, starts with a D, dictionary, if that's how you can remember it. And then connotative meanings are ones that have associations or feelings tied in association with words. That was not written well at all. I used association twice. That's a mistake. But point being, connotative are all about feelings and emotions. How do you feel when you're reading something? Denotative are what they mean. So, for example, I could be like, oh, this is an absurd statement. And the meaning is that it's a strange statement. It's over the top, whatever it may be. However, the connotative meaning would be the feeling it's applied to it, which could be like, oh, I'm actually extremely angry about it. And I'm using absurd because it shows how angry about it, how it's really an over the top anger about it. It's not just, oh, I'm slightly angry about it, whatever it may be. So that's a big difference between connotative and denotative. Because denotative is all about being like, oh, this is what the word literally means. And connotative is all about what does it make you feel. And this is very important in writing, because you're going to see a lot of the time authors will use word choice that might not be like the most literary accurate word you would use. You wouldn't necessarily use certain terms to describe certain things. However, when you apply the connotative meaning, it helps be like, oh, this makes sense in the context, because it shows how visceral or how powerful this text could be, or how much the writer cares about it. And this also can help show the writer's perspective and their stance on it, because a big part of the AP exam is understanding where the author is coming from, the context the author is writing in. And denotative and connotative meanings can really affect that. So again, I just went through this a lot, but applying these. So use a denotative definition to understand the idea on the basic level. What does the word actually mean? And the importance of the word itself, while use a connotative definition to understand how it is making the reader feel and its purpose in the text, as well as how the author felt when they were writing it. And the importance is beyond the word itself. So on using these for words is very important. What College Board does, which I think is very interesting, is they'll take a few certain words in the pieces that they're explaining, and they'll give it a connotative, a denotative, and then a perspective definition. And I think that's a very good way you could go about it. Obviously, it's very time consuming, but if you at least can go about your writing like, oh, they picked this word because it makes sense literary wise, but it really makes you feel this, and the perspective of the author aligns with it, that will be very helpful. And we'll see that in the multiple choice later. So I'm not going to go more into that now, because it'll be a lot more helpful when we're actually going through the multiple choice for you to understand it. However, let's go into the perspective of the author. This is a lot simpler, but this is the perspective that the author holds while they're writing. This will usually affect the argument and the point of the text. Anyone who's in an AP social study knows about how to write POV for a sourcing on a document for DBQ. Very simply, it's like, why are they writing this? What's their perspective? what was like Abraham Lincoln's perspective on the Gettysburg Address. Very simple, very basic. It helps understanding perspective can help understand the context of the piece, and this is very important. A lot of the time in the AP exam, it might ask you why is the author using this word. On the essays, it could be like explain the author's context and or the reasoning for using this rhetoric. And understanding the perspective of the author can be very helpful. Why did Thomas Jefferson write the Declaration of Independence? Well, they wrote it because their perspective was that they had to be freed from Britain. Necessarily, the fact could be on the other side that they didn't need to be freed from Britain, but that's the perspective, and that's why understanding perspective is so important. Understanding perspective is one of the most important key ideas on the AP exam. It's rather simple. I feel like many people can do it automatically. However, it's a very good skill to learn. It can be used with connotative and denotative meanings in order to fully analyze the text. So what we normally do is what we're going to do now. I'll give you a minute to quickly read through this. You can pause the video because you probably can't read in that time. So pause the video now, read it quickly, and then we're going to go into AP questions. Okay, so let's go into the AP questions. Like normal, what we do is I don't keep the text up so you can go back in the video to look at the text. However, on AP Classroom, this is part of the Unit 5 practice check. There are 9 questions on AP Classroom for this reading. However, I only picked 5 of them because I don't have time to do all 9 in this video. I might do like over break, like units 1 through 5 multiple choice practice like thing. I don't know. We'll see. But in this video, it's just we're going to do 5 questions based on this reading. So let's go into it. So in the second sentence of the first paragraph, the author mentions cookbooks, catalogs, and telephone books primarily to what? So if you could go back in the video, but if you remember in the reading, it's talking about comparing. It's being like, oh, if science is organizing things, why wouldn't a cookbook be science? And they're saying it's not. So let's go through our options. Is it A, illustrate the broad array of objects that are organized by scientific principles? This isn't a terrible answer. It's not a great one either because it's not what it's asking. The entire point is that if you read it, it's all about kind of putting science above a lot of other things and saying science is worth more almost than a lot of other arguments. And it's like a very important piece of understanding. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's trying to pretty much be like, oh, are really cookbook science? No, they're not. Science is like more important than that. So we're trying to see something that shows that science is being like, is taking too much into its grasp. It's being like, this is science is above this or this is below science. So I don't think A is the best answer, but we'll go more into that. B, concede that rational argumentation can sometimes lead to absurd conclusions. This one's not a terrible answer. However, that's not what the argument's about. Is B true? Yes. And A is also true. They're both true statements, but they're not helpful in the context of the reading. C, demonstrate a particular definition of science is overly inclusive. I really like this answer. It's very truthful and it fits the argument of the passage, which is what is science pretty much. Or D, highlight the inherent difficulty to distinguish science over other types of knowledge. That one's also true. However, this is about saying science is overly inclusive. Science is about too much here. So that's why the answer is going to be C, demonstrate that it's overly inclusive. All 4 are very good answers. I'll say this is a very challenging question. However, this is very important to understand. You have to understand what the thesis of the piece is asking in context of the problem. So are all these statements true? Yes. Could all of these be correct answers if the question was changed? Yes. However, if the thesis is about understanding why science is so important, it has to be about why science is on top of these ideas. B, in the final sentence of the first paragraph, the author chooses the use of the word absurd in order to blank. So I was hinting at this earlier, but this is where you can really bring in connotative and denotative meanings. So I actually think I use this exact example. Absurd is just a simple word. It's like over the top, annoying, whatever it may be, crazy. However, the use of the word absurd on an even deeper level it can demonstrate how important certain things are. It can be like, oh, this is actually crazy. It can be like, oh, why would this be? It's like, it's a very big, like, it's a statement word. So even though the denotative might not mean much, the connotative can really tell a lot about how the author is very annoyed by this idea, how they really hate it. So A, to demonstrate that even sound premises can lead to irrational conclusions. Not a terrible answer. I'm going to keep this on the table. B, argue that evidence that seems illogical should not be considered by scientists. I don't think this is a terrible answer, but I also don't agree with this statement because they never say that evidence that seems illogical should not be considered. They never say that, so that's not a good one. C, emphasis on previous distinction between rationality and reasonableness. I do like this answer a lot as well, so I think A and C are 2 up there. And D implied that too much rigor can lead to nonsensical inferences. D is also not terrible. However, D, I think, compared to A and C, is just not as strong. B is C when saying too much rigor can lead to nonsensical inferences. Is it true? Yes. However, that's not really what it's about, so I wouldn't really go into that. A is a very good answer because it says how sound premises can lead to irrational conclusions. However, I think if you read the passage, you'll see that they don't really believe that's a sound premise. I think they believe that it's a little bit absurd, and that's why they're using the word absurd. They're even though denotatively it would make sense, connotatively it doesn't, and that's why C is going to be the correct answer. Because it's all about emphasizing a previous distinction between rationality and reasonableness. It's trying to emphasize something and showing how crazy it is, how they believe it's so crazy. C. In the fourth sentence of the second paragraph, the author uses the word qualified in order to. So again, a very similar question with connotative and denotative. So A, could see that some scientists are not sufficiently prepared for their work. Not terrible, but again, this is more denotative than connotative, so I wouldn't really go into that. B, identify a difference between real scientists and fictional characters. Not a good answer at all. C, explain why not all scientific investigations produce accurate results. Not terrible. Or D, note a condition that must be met for an observation to be scientific. So I think the best answer is probably going to be D here. And the reason why I'm saying that is because it's all about connotative versus denotative. In any question that says the author's use of the word blank in order to, it's not about denotative meanings. It's very rare going to be a denotative thing. It's mostly going to be connotative. And the reason why is because denotative, it's really going to work in all four answer contexts. Qualified makes sense that they're not sufficient, that they're fictional versus real. Not all produce accurate results. However, it doesn't make sense connotatively. Connotatively, qualified is saying it's scientific that only qualified scientists can have scientific outcomes, or only real scientists can have those good scientific results. So that's why it doesn't really make sense that yes, A is true, and they're conceding that. However, they're not trying to be like, oh yeah, not everyone's prepared. They're trying to say not everyone's prepared, and that's why they shouldn't be followed. So even though that's A is a very good answer and it's very true, doesn't back their argument. And that's a very big thing. We're at the point where you're practicing for the AP where you have to tie this into how thesis is in practice. If this is trying to show how important science is, they wouldn't be trying to be like, oh, not all scientists are good at what they do. No, they would say some scientists aren't good at what they do, and they shouldn't be. They shouldn't matter. So that's why D is so important. Saying if they're not qualified, they shouldn't even be considered scientists. This is how they should be observed. D. In the final sentence of the third paragraph, the clause, although we do not control the conditions of observation, functions as a transitional element that. So this is a transitional element. Let's go into it. Although we do not control the conditions of observation. A explains the role of observation. Not really. Doesn't do that at all. B refutes a claim regarding the status of astronomy. It doesn't really. It's not really refuting anything either. It says although we do not although what we do control the conditions of observation. That's not really what it's saying. C suggests that the definition of experiment has changed over time. It's not suggesting that at all. Or D clarifies the reasons astronomy meets the standards for scientific rigor. D is the best one. And again, this is all about the piece. At this point, you should understand the thesis is saying this is what's scientific, this isn't what's scientific, and this is why understanding what's scientific is so important. So it wouldn't be like, oh, this is why. They're not trying to be like, oh, astronomy barely fits in. What they're trying to say is this is why astronomy makes sense. And this is it clarifying. It says we control the conditions for observation. That's why it's so important. It's saying this is why it qualifies for the standards for scientific rigor. It's not explaining the role of observation. That's earlier in the text. It's not refuting a claim because no one's saying that there's no claim that's present about the status of astronomy. And it's not suggesting a definition of an experiment. Last question. The author discusses different scientists in the last two sentences, primarily to A, explain why some scientists have advanced further than others, not at all. Correct a misconception about the nature of scientific rationality. Not a terrible answer. C, underscore that all scientific thought ultimately rests on observation. Not terrible. D, resolve an apparent contradiction between empiricism and experimentalism. I don't like this answer at all. I don't think D makes sense that much. So it's between B and C. So B, correct a misconception about the nature of scientific rationality. This makes sense in the context because it's saying numbers versus not using numbers and things like that. However, C is not terrible either. Underscore that all scientific thought ultimately rests on observation. However, even though this is what it's saying, it's actually not fully saying that. It's saying it can also be fully numerically based. And it's also trying to correct that even though so many use numbers and stuff, so many don't. So that's why B is going to be the best answer. It's trying to correct something, trying to correct that misconception. So all in all, that's Unit 5 of AP English Language and Composition. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you're understanding AP Lang a lot more. Over the next few weeks, we have a video on the synthesis essay coming out. We're going to do a full multiple choice like breakdown for for the exam, things like that. So it should be fun at this point. Hopefully you're getting a good feel on what the AP exam is going to be like. So check out my other videos on this channel, and I hope you guys are getting to understand the AP exam a lot better. But obviously post below what you guys need help with and things like that. Aside from that, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.